All right, awesome. We are live. I will start sharing my screen here and we will get started. All righty, welcome everybody to the UWSP Student Chapter of the Wildlife Society's General Member Meeting. We have a great one for you today, so thanks for coming. So to be able to go out on our projects and volunteer, you're going to have to pay dues this year. And we have two options. You can do $5 for the semester or $8 for the year. And there's a couple ways to pay that. You can pay online through PayPal using our my email there, or you can cash drop off your dues at the TWS office during my office hour on Mondays. And if you use the PayPal option, make sure you use friends and family. Otherwise, you're going to get charged a fee. If you have any questions about paying dues or anything related to money, you can ask Brylan, myself, or Melinda. We'd be happy to help.
All right, so along with dues, we've got just a general membership form for you guys to fill out. And just a reminder that when you're joining our Zoom meetings, if you could please use your full name as your name in the meeting, that would be really handy so I can keep better track of attendance. We've also got hold harmless forms. Next slide. So they're just a PDF file. I sent it out a few weeks ago. So check your email for that. If you have not gotten it and you have checked your inbox and you just can't find it, you can email me and I will send you the form. And then just send it back to me with the subject line of your email being TWS hold harmless. And then if you could put your full name in the document title, that makes managing things a little easier for me. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Melinda. Lizzie.
So our conservation topic this week is really cool because it's actually based on research that our former, this chapter's former president, Catherine Rexroad, she did this research, which she was here my freshman year. So if anyone's seniors, you might remember her. But she did this research on southern flying squirrels, trying to estimate their density in the Midwest as compared to the East. So since southern flying squirrels are isolated because they have the Mississippi River on the west, and then just all the agriculture really fragments the habitat that they have. So this can lead to several things. One is that the home ranges turn out to be much smaller in the Midwest compared to the East, because there's just more continuous forest in the East for them to have larger home ranges. Another thing that was really fascinating is that male and female home ranges are actually a similar size in the Midwest, which is really bizarre because usually the males have a much larger home range than the females. She estimated that the density in the Midwest of southern flying squirrels could be as few as 1.64 squirrels per hectare in the winter and as few as 0.18 per hectare in the summer, which is quite low. So it's just very interesting to see the comparison between the Midwest versus in Eastern states. So she's currently doing research seeing how fragmentation, testosterone levels, and parasite load also affect squirrel density. And obviously this research could help with the management of southern flying squirrels, but also with northern flying squirrels, which are deemed to be more at risk due to climate change. So with that, we can move on to our quiz bowl. So what is the name of the furry membrane between a flying squirrel's front and back limbs? You can laugh at the answers I had to come up with, the wrong ones, but there's paraglide, patagium, Patagonia, parachute, and pandemonium. So which of those P words is the right answer?
Alrighty, looks like we got everybody. Gonna end the poll here and share the results.
I like the music, Nate. It's a good touch. You guys knocked it out of the park. It's absolutely potassium, not all those other random things that I made up. So good job.
Alrighty, cool. Thank you, Lizzie. All right, guys. So the Daniel O. Trainer Wildlife Health Seminar Series is starting up this Thursday. So these are going to be some super cool talks if you're interested: wildlife diseases, wildlife health. And it starts off with Jonathan Sleeman, who's the director, the center director for the USGS National Wildlife Health Center. So pretty big name coming at us for the first week here, and that's again on Thursday. These are free, and if you head over to UWSP, the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife page on the Point website, you should be able to register for free and get the Zoom links there. So don't want to miss those talks. Should be super cool. There's also a restoration workday that's getting put on by like the Portage County Humane Society. And the primary tasks of that workday are going to include removing trees, undesirable vegetation, clearing brush, stuff like that. And there's 2 dates that you guys can sign up for, and that's Sunday, November 1st and Friday, November 6th. And both of those days, it's going to run from noon to 4. And if you guys are interested, you can email me or Marco Mascati and Chris Lady. And those are your contacts at the Humane Society. So cool little opportunity to get involved in some habitat management and a little restoration project that the Humane Society is putting on.
Hi everyone. So last week I sent out an application for the Midwest Conference. It's due next Thursday by midnight, and then all members are welcome to apply. And if you sent in an abstract a couple weeks ago, make sure you apply, because we can fund you for going to this conference. And it's a really great opportunity to network with professionals and just show off all that pointer research that we do here. And if you have any questions, you can email me and also send applications to me as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Mackenzie. Yeah, great opportunity, guys. Now's your chance. This is probably the cheapest conferences we'll ever be, and we do sponsor a lot of folks. So go ahead and apply. Amanda.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to give a quick update on the first Project Wildlife series that was released last week. I sent it out Tuesday morning, and I already got a lot of feedback from teachers and different places on campus and in Schmeekly and for environmental ed centers around Wisconsin. They really like the project. They're very excited to see like what TWS is up to, what we're doing. And I would share a quick statistic. I just checked the number of views that the first video has gotten on YouTube. And as of just a few minutes ago, it's at 115 views. So I think that's pretty good. So if you're interested in helping out with future videos or info sheets like you see there, definitely send me an email. Or if you're a co-leader and you have a project that you want featured, also let me know that. Be great.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda.
Hi, everyone. Our Bible study is a Bible study that's geared towards natural resource majors, and it's on Wednesdays from 7 to 8 p.m. And so far we've gone through like topics such as like the Trinity, the water of life. It's just a great way to have like good discussions if you're interested in learning more about the Bible and meeting natural resource majors. So yeah, check us out if you're interested. The Zoom link is right there. And if you have any questions, you can email me or Megan.
Awesome. Thank you, Melina. Jacob.
Hey guys, so trapping has ended. I did set up 2 camera traps, and we're gonna be checking them every week, probably on Sundays. Whoever is interested can help me out. But I do need help cleaning the traps. We've got about 50 of them. I'm gonna do it tomorrow at the cache at 1800. So if anyone's interested in helping me out with that, that'd be great. You can email me right there, that link.
Sweet. Thank you, Jacob. Waterfowl project.
Hi. This is just a reminder that the Waterfall Project is still looking for co-leaders. We're a spring semester project and we check wood duck boxes at the Mead Wildlife area, and we're encouraging everyone to apply. So if you have any questions or if you have your applications, please email me or Aiden with the emails below. And we sent out the application in the meeting minutes last week, and then Nate also sent out the application. So look for it there. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Waterfowl project. Gray Squirrel.
All right, so we are also still looking for co-leaders. The application got sent out a few times. I think it just got sent out last week again. We are a spring semester project. We usually trap on weekends. And not every project gets to do like hands-on and actually handle their animals, which we do. So, that's kind of unique with us. There's a few other projects. Also I know there's a lot of projects looking for co-leaders. You don't only get like wildlife experience, you also get, some leadership experience being a co-leader. You get some public speaking skills. There's just some other skills that you get that we don't like put on here or advertise. And it's just great for freshmen, sophomores, juniors to get involved. So apply, even if not for the Gray Squirrel project, apply for other projects. The application deadline is this Sunday.
Well put, Tyler. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Saw Wet.
Hey everyone, so I'm just here to remind you that the Solid Owl project is still looking for co-leaders, and we're still accepting those applications. Also just reminding you that the deadline is coming up soon. It's going to be November 1st, so if you're interested in applying, please make sure to get your applications in by then. You can send those applications to Carter at the email below, and then also if you have any questions, you can email him as well. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Shelby.
Hello, everyone. So every Friday, we feature a wildlife photo taken by one of our members on our Instagram and Facebook page for what we call Fauna Friday. So if you have any cool wildlife photos that you've taken in the past or recently, you can send them in by DMing our Instagram page or emailing me, and my email's up there on the slide. And then you can follow our student chapter on multiple platforms. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, you can add us on Snapchat with the code up there. If you know of anyone who couldn't make it to this meeting, and if you can't make it to a future meeting, our meetings are recorded on this Zoom, so they're also posted on our YouTube channel, and they're also on our Facebook page.
Awesome. Thank you, Shelby.
All right, folks. The apparel order form is still open. It's going to be open till November 1st. I know last week I said it was open till November 14th or something, but since we decided we will offer in-person pickup, we had to move the date up a little bit so that the apparel could get done by Thanksgiving, basically. So just make sure to get your forms in now because it's due this Sunday. And we got a lot of cool stuff. We have like so many options. It's awesome. And the link for the store is right there. So feel free to get stuff for yourself or for your family. Don't forget that Christmas is coming up. So like, just buy your parents TWS gear. Why not?
Awesome. Thank you, Lizzie. All right, so that's it for announcements. Next week, we have Michaela Greider coming in, who is a past TWS alum and UWSP graduate student now, working with wetlands and invertebrates. She's going to give us a talk about her journey and navigating the grad school stuff. It should be a super cool talk. But without further ado, Michael Joyce is here this week, and he's a wildlife ecologist from the Natural Resource Research Institute. That's part of University of Minnesota Duluth. So I will stop my share and hand it over to you, Michael. You're muted, I think, Michael.
I only do that every Zoom meeting. What I was saying was thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to give this presentation, and I really enjoyed hearing about the projects you guys are working on a little bit. And you'll see some of the species you're working on featured in this presentation. So as Nate said, I am a wildlife ecologist with the Natural Resources Research Institute. We are an applied research institute that's a part of the University of Minnesota Duluth, and I'm just going to leave it at that. So where I'd like to start, hang on a second here, there we go. So where I'd like to start is just talking about kind of what path I took to become a wildlife professional. As the image here suggests, I did not take a very linear path. There was a lot of meandering. And so I figured it might be interesting for some of you to hear how I got where I am. So I grew up in southern Wisconsin, Prairie du Sac, if any of you are familiar. I enjoyed hunting, fishing, the outdoors, but I really didn't think about natural resources or wildlife as a career when I began school at UW-Madison in 2004. So I graduated in 2008. I was a molecular biology major, and it really wasn't until the end of that degree that I took a wildlife ecology class and realized, oh shit, this is what I should have been doing the whole time. And so I didn't have the money to take on 3 more years of school, and so I wrote out that major. But it was really important for me at that point to realize that's where I wanted to go. For the 3 years after I graduated, I worked as a lab technician in developmental biology, cancer genetics. Those are really great opportunities for me to learn about research and research design. But the more important thing that happened for me at that time is I took opportunities to do some volunteering on research projects, as well as with state agencies and doing some management work. Unfortunately, I couldn't take a summer position. I needed the salary, and to be quite frank, I did not have the background that people were looking for summer research experiences. But I gained valuable experience. I was able to leverage that into my computer's being funny here, sorry, a graduate position in Duluth. I did both my master's and PhDs in Duluth, working on martins in Minnesota. And again, this was an opportunity through my coursework, through my research, and really by reaching out and finding any opportunity I could with other graduate students' research projects or with the DNR to really bolster my experience and try to make up what I didn't get being part of a student chapter, or I listened with some of your projects with a little bit of envy of what I was doing as an undergrad. But fortunately, it worked out really well for me. Since I graduated, I've fortunately gotten a full-time position. I know a lot of grad students that were kind of concurrent with me that did not. And so really, I guess the reason I wanted to share this information is, number one, people's paths can differ, and I think that's really important to understand. But number two, it's really important to take advantage of opportunities that exist, even if you don't know they're there, to really go looking for opportunities to get where you want to be professionally. And I have no regrets about molecular biology or any of the rest. And so before I move into talking about specifically some of the fisher research that we're working on, I just want to give you kind of an overview of my research interests. So I'm very broadly interested in ecology, conservation, and management of wildlife. Most of the work I do focuses on mammalian mesocarnivores. However, there's a lot of other species that I'm interested in conducting research on as well. One of the cool things about my position is we are largely grant funded at the Natural Resources Research Institute. And so I have a lot of flexibility to design and pursue a research program. And so one of the cool things is I get to really try to identify important issues, current or emerging issues that our wildlife face. And I take a very question-oriented approach where I try to identify questions that I think are really important, and then use that question to design a study and to go seek grant funding to help answer that question and address that issue. And so a lot of my research focuses on spatial and habitat ecology, generally answering the question, where do animals spend their time and why? And part of this is really linking individual behavior and constraints placed by the landscape up to populations to understand how things like human land use or climate change influence what wildlife have available to them and where they have it available to them. Another part of my research program that I'm not going to get into a lot today is improving the way we map wildlife habitat using LiDAR and other remote sensing technologies. And so then another kind of complementary part of my research focuses on foraging ecology and diet selection, and really trying to understand how foraging behavior influences species interactions, not just predator-prey, but predator-predator as well, and how that influences wildlife dynamics, population dynamics. And more recently, really looking more at how carnivores through their diet contribute to ecosystem function. So that's kind of the overview. What I'm going to be talking about today is fishers, fishers, fishers. And so as I transition, before I start talking about some of the current research that we're doing, I'm going to give kind of a brief overview of the history and status of fishers in the Great Lakes region, but with an emphasis on Minnesota. And so this map shows in blue shading the historical distribution of fishers at the time of European settlement. You can see we had fishers pretty much everywhere in Wisconsin, almost everywhere in Minnesota. Lowly Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio also had fishers. And so this was a very different situation to what happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s, as we had large-scale forest removal, slash and burn forest harvest, and also unregulated trapping. And so we largely lost fishers from the United States side of the border throughout the early 1900s. You can see the dates here. There's a question mark in Minnesota because we probably never lost fishers in Minnesota. The boundary waters, the Red Lake peatlands, there's other areas where fishers probably persisted despite the widespread declines. And so we closed seasons, we took more steps, the forest regenerated, and we really recovered most of the range of fishers in at least Minnesota, Wisconsin, and at least the UP of Michigan. And so in Minnesota, it was a story of natural recolonization. In Wisconsin and the UP, there were successive reintroductions and translocation efforts. And so we really are in a better place, although you can see that blue line. There's still a lot of areas that used to have fishers that don't right now. I would like to just mention, I'll touch on this briefly at the end. More recently, we actually see a fisher range expansion in Minnesota. This is a picture from Hastings, Minnesota from last April. Downtown Hastings, Minnesota, you can see a fisher. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but there's a fisher just trucking across a parking lot here. Not typical fisher habitat. So there's some new questions that we can look at in fishers in this context. And I took the part out, but fishers have actually been confirmed in Iowa again. And so one of the people I work with is from Iowa. I shouldn't say as a population, but there have been confirmed sightings. One of the people I work with grew up in Iowa, so I like to tease him that Iowa doesn't deserve fishers, but I guess the fishers don't agree with me. So how has the fisher population changed in Minnesota? Fishers are harvested as a fur bearer. We have a season every, used to be kind of late fall, early winter. Now it's really around Christmas time. And this graph shows how our fisher population has changed since we initiated the trapping season in the late 70s. So we had a peak of around 16 to 17,000 fishers in the state, the mid 90s through the early 2000s. And over the last 20 years, we see about a 50% decline in our fisher population. This isn't like, oh my gosh, they need to be protected. We still have right around 10,000 fishers. We still have enough to harvest. That harvest is being monitored very closely. But Fishers have recently been listed as threatened in the southern Sierra Nevada mountains in California. And they are a species that, because of their reliance on old growth forest and relatively unimpacted landscapes, they are very sensitive to what we do. And so it is really important that we learn not only what happened with this decline and what we can do, but really what other threats do fishers face, because we don't want it to get worse than it has. I do want to emphasize we have some sign that our population has stabilized and may be starting to increase. We've seen some of that in the past, and so time will tell. But it's not all doom and gloom. It's really more of a let's dig in deeper here sort of a situation. And so partly in response to this decline, the Minnesota DNR had a Fisher and actually Martin research project from 2008 to 2015. As a graduate student, I worked on the Martin side and a little bit on the Fisher side. And since finishing up, I've really shifted a lot of my focus to Fishers. That project radio collared 114 Fishers over that approximately 8-year period. Fishers were relocated weekly from an airplane. And we got a ton of data. It was a very field intensive project. There's a lot of data that we're still actually crunching from this project. And so that project was partly to figure out what's going on with the decline, but a lot of it too is just updating what we know about Fishers so the way that they're managed in the state. And so I'm not going to get into all of the details, but there's really kind of 3 potential causes that we think are important to the Fisher decline: overharvest, predation, and habitat loss. And I'm really going to focus on predation and habitat loss a little more. With the overharvest, there were certainly some years where our harvest levels were higher than we would like. And if we had harvest of that intensity over a long duration of time, we would expect a population decline. But it doesn't really seem to be the main driver. And I'm happy to talk more about that at the end if people have questions. And so first I'm going to touch on predation. From that project, there were 26 Fishers that were killed by predators. Almost all of them were females, and all but one of the females were adults. And so this is where we generally think of juvenile carnivores as being unexperienced and more susceptible to predation and other causes of mortality. But we saw exactly the opposite here. All of those adult females were killed around the time of reproduction, some a little early, some a little later. But the predation events we documented led to the loss of 15 litters. And bobcats were overwhelmingly the main predator. And one of the things that I want to emphasize is that it's hard to see from this graph, but the level of predation on female Fishers that we document in Minnesota is not sustainable for the long period of time. Fishers have a very slow life history. They don't produce a lot of young. They occupy a lot of space. And when you get below about 90% annual survival, it's really hard for that population to be stable or increasing. So losing adult females is really not good for the population. And one of the interesting things that we see is that over the same 20-year period that our bobcat population has essentially dropped by 50%, our Fisher population has dropped by 50%. Our bobcat population has about doubled, in fact, a little more than doubled over that same time. And so we really want to dig into this a little more. This is a project that we were supposed to start last July, and a combination of COVID and politics has held this up. We're hopeful that we'll be starting next July 1. But this is a project that we think is really important to understanding what's going on with bobcats and Fishers in the state. And so the main objective is to determine why bobcats are such a major predator of Fishers. And so what we'll be doing is looking at GPS collaring bobcats and Fishers, looking at movement, habitat use, activity, and diet to understand what puts some Fishers at risk and why they're really only at risk about the time period that they give birth, which is kind of early to mid-March in Minnesota. We're also going to look a little deeper at some historical forced harvest data to try to understand how that relates to bobcat and Fisher trends, And that could be really informative for land management going forward. And we haven't had a real intense bobcat study in the state since before I was born, actually, the late 70s, early 80s. And so we're really interested to kind of update what we know about bobcats. That study was done well before their population increased. And I do want to just give a shout out to Michael McMahon, who's a PhD student that politics, if they don't get in the way, will hopefully be working on this project. So what I'm going to spend most of the rest of the time that I talk covering is our concerns about habitat and fishers, and really not habitat in a broad sense, but really just looking at fisher reproductive dens. We are concerned about other types of habitat, but this is one where we're most concerned. And so reproductive dens are structures that females use to both give birth to their kits and then to care for them while they're nursing and even after they're weaned. And so they pick secure structures where they and their kits are protected from predators and from the elements. This is data from Minnesota, although data from everywhere else in North America corroborates this. They pretty much only use tree cavities as reproductive dens. They will use some hollow logs later after the kits are weaned. And this is something we've seen elsewhere, especially in the Pacific Northwest. But really across their range, over 1,000 reproductive dens, over 98% of them are in tree cavities. So for all intents and purposes, they are a cavity obligate species. They are not the only species that relies on tree cavities, and tree cavities are really a keystone habitat resource that a lot of different wildlife need for various parts of their life history. So they provide security, a secure, weather-resistant place for raising young, for having, you can see the bees, for having a nest. And so what I'm talking about is really focused on fishers, but there is a lot of research suggesting that there's kind of a global decline in tree cavity availability as a result of how we manage our forests. And so while I'm looking at through the lens of what fishers need, there are a lot of other species that need these. And you guys know that because you're working on a wood duck project that is really aimed at the same sort of problem, but for a different species. So the major question that we really would like to know is, are cavities actually a limiting resource? So if we put more cavities in the landscape, either by the way we manage the forest or by putting up artificial den boxes, which I'll talk about in a second, can we get a positive response of the population? And that's an open question. We don't know, but we have some concerns that they might be. And part of that is that the trees that fishers use are among the largest 2% of trees on the landscape. So on average in Minnesota, they need 20-inch diameter trees. Certainly out west, they use trees that are way bigger than that. And so these trees are not very abundant, but maybe they don't need that many because they only need a handful of dens throughout a pretty big home range. But so rarity is one concern to us. And another is just how our activities could impact den availability. So we know that because they're among the biggest trees in the landscape, they take a long time to develop. The ecological processes of heart rot that lead to a cavity that a fisher can actually use are very complex, and they operate on very long time scales. So if we want to conserve habitat for fishers and maintain a certain amount of cavities, even if it's not at the maximum amount that would jump the population up, we really need to know that we're balancing cavity gain with cavity loss. And so what we really need to know is, how long does it take for cavities to form? And once they're formed, how long are they available for fishers to use? These aren't questions that we have good answers to, unfortunately. And so out of the over 1,000 reproductive dens that have been found for fishers, there's very little published data on how old those trees are. And part of the problem is old, decayed trees are really hard to core. So it's really hard to get a good age on them. So there is a little bit of data here. I would like to emphasize our data is preliminary. This is something we're still working on. And if we just focus on aspen, because it's a species that is really popular, it's really prevalent in Minnesota, so a lot of the Fisher dens are in aspen, then what we see is on average about 90 years it takes for an aspen tree to get big enough to form a heart rot cavity. There's not a lot of trees that get that age, if aspen trees, and it's not just harvest that keeps them from getting that age. It's also the fact that they're an early successional tree. And so, but essentially that's a really long time. And if we think about the average preferred economic harvest rotation of aspen in Minnesota is from 40 to 60 years. If we're rotating our aspen at that age without leaving residuals, we're not allowing our trees to get old enough so that these cavities can reform. On the other end of things, how long does it take for cavities to, or I'm sorry, how well do cavities persist once they are formed? This is an image of a marten cavity from out in Oregon, or California rather. And you can see there's a nice snag here that fell down from a windstorm and turned to mashed potatoes essentially. And so this is something that, again, we don't have a lot of good data. It takes a lot of time and effort to accumulate the data of how long cavities persist. But what we know from one study on Fishers and one study on martens is that it's quite variable. Over a 8 to 12 year period for Fishers in California, they had some cavities that maybe turned from a living tree to a dead tree, or that fell down, but they were still a hollow log. So, but functionally, they were still available. By contrast, a study on martens in a slightly different study area found that over about half the time, 16% of their cavities were lost. I'm not putting up preliminary data, but we're actively monitoring this in Minnesota to better figure this out. And it's going to probably depend on tree species and the status when they were used, whether they were living or dead. But that sort of information is really important as we look at land management and how we can continue to provide this habitat for fishers. On the other side of things, in some places, we likely can't wait 80, 90 years for trees to regenerate and produce natural cavities. And so, as has been done for many other species and previously for fishers before our study, we started a Fisher Den box study. And the whole goal of this project, we know from various other studies and anecdotes that fishers will produce and move their kits to artificial boxes. In fact, there's a handful of wood duck boxes in Minnesota that they found kits in. I'd be interested to hear at the end if you guys have found any mammals in your wood duck boxes. But our main question isn't whether they'll use them, it's where will they use them. And so we've set up a design here that I can talk more about later. But it's really aimed at understanding what forest context fishers are likely to use den boxes in, so that if we go out, the next step would be going out and putting out more den boxes. We want to know that we're going to get some good bang for our buck there and put it in places that fishers are going to use it. We will, through this project, evaluate, not directly, but we'll get some data that will help us evaluate whether cavities are a limiting resource. And then using 1 and 2, we can then develop some instructions and management guidelines that some of our wildlife managers are very interested in having here. And so this is our study area. It's really a collection of 5 or 6 study areas. Initially, when we started, we were going to put about 40 boxes in this area that's largely Chippewa National Forest and some state and county forest land in north central Minnesota, and about 40 boxes in this part of the Superior National Forest. One of the cool things that happened as we started working on this project and doing some outreach is we had a lot of people come to us and say, hey, we've got some money, can we build some boxes and increase your sample size? And so we have 12 boxes with the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe that are being monitored actively. We were, able to put some boxes in the Hubachek Wilderness Research Center, the Cloquet Forestry Center, and on Carleton County Land Department land in this part of the state. And then we're also working with Blandon Paper Company to put up boxes on some of their land holdings. And so what was going to be a study of 80 den boxes is now a study of 120 plus den boxes. And really this has allowed us to spread farther geographically, but also to hit different ownerships. So we have federal land, We have reservation land, state and county forest land, some university forest land, and then some industrial forest land. So really, by putting this all together, we really stand a better chance of learning what we need to about where fishers are going to use these boxes. Once they're up, we have a very intensive monitoring program. So we are monitoring these boxes currently year-round. Each box has a remote camera so that we can see animals going and coming. Each box has a hair snare, essentially a glue strip above the opening. It doesn't catch all species, so red squirrels are good at sneaking in and not getting their hair caught. Fishers and martins are not. So it's really good information and genetics actually on what individuals are using our boxes. During the reproductive denning season, we go with essentially a GoPro on a stick, look inside. You can see a kit right here. This is not one of our boxes. This is one from British Columbia. And then finally, we have a temperature logger on the inside of each box. And so one of the reasons for that is that if we have a box that seems relatively cold compared to the other ones, that might help us explain why it's not getting used. But it also really helps with monitoring. Cameras are not 100% perfect. And here's an example. The blue line is ambient temperature. I have another master's student, Taylor Vielander, that is working on some models to predict temperature within boxes of different sizes and natural cavities. And one of the things you can see, the yellow line is his model prediction. The red line is the actual box temperature. So from the camera, we don't see a fisher go in, but we see her peeking out of the box. Right as this temperature starts to climb, the box temperature above what we would predict it would be. We then see her leaving the next morning, and then you can see that box temperature climb back down to what we would expect it to be without a fisher. So this is something that is really, we think, going to be helpful to help us figure out use patterns when cameras aren't 100% perfect. So I'm just going to go through some of our preliminary results. Right now, we have pictures from about 90 boxes. We actually have pictures from about 100, but they haven't all been added to our analysis queue. Over the last year, we've collected 1.3 million pictures. So if any of you are bored and really like looking at trail camera pictures, it's taking us a lot of time to get through these. And we're currently looking at some more advanced artificial intelligence methods to help us go through those pictures a little quicker. So right now, we've really only analyzed about 20 to 23% of those pictures. So these are all caveats. I'm going to show you some cool pictures. We have several years before we'll have a clear picture on data for our objectives. But one of the cool things is that we have seen fishers within less than a year use about 20% of our boxes. We have not documented reproduction yet, but we've seen a lot of use for resting. So females going in there to rest in the winter. We actually saw, I don't know if I had the picture in here, but we actually saw a fisher kill a gray squirrel. We didn't see that, but we saw her drag the gray squirrel into the box and come out of it. So here's some of the cool pictures we've seen of fishers. We have a female in the box, males outside. This is the breeding season. He's as politely as a male fisher can, asking if she wants to mate. I don't know if you can see, but her teeth are bared. Her answer is unequivocally no, thank you, not right now. And so this is a really cool observation for a number of reasons. First of all, it's just a really cool picture. But the other reason is that we think that female fishers use natural cavities in their mate choice process. And so to see that same thing going on in the den boxes encourages us that females fishers are not only using them, but they're viewing them in a similar way that they view natural cavities. Here's a box that last fall, actually about this time last fall, we had a couple of red squirrels packing cones and bedding material into it. And we had a male fisher come at night. I don't know if you guys can see, but this red squirrel had a death wish. Now, the red squirrel was lucky because these boxes are only meant for females. They exclude males because if a male who did not breed with a female can get in and she has kits there, he'll kill the kits. And so he tried to stick his head in, it wouldn't fit. He tried to stick his front arms in, they fit, but they couldn't get the squirrel. So part of me wish, as a predator biologist, part of me really wishes it was a female and it would have got the squirrel, but still really cool thing to see. One more picture of fishers here. This was a female that found one of our boxes earliest last winter, about a week and a half after we put this box out, in fact. And she came, she rested in the box for about 8 hours. She came out, she took a dump on the top of the box. By human standards, that would be an insult. By carnivore standards, that's essentially claiming the box. And then she went back in and slept for another 10 hours. So we haven't seen kits yet, but we see a lot of signs that fishers are finding our boxes and they're interested in using them. And so more to come on the fisher angle in the next few years. Now, we care about fishers, but as I mentioned, there's a lot of other species that need cavities. And so we see a lot of other cool species. Martins are always dear to my heart. They're what I did my master's and PhD on. So we've seen martins using them. We've seen flying squirrels using them, and gray squirrels and red squirrels and chipmunks. But a lot of flying squirrel activity. In one of our study areas, we pretty much only have southern, and so a lot of southern flying squirrel activity. In the other one, we primarily have northern, and so we're seeing both of the species use our boxes. I don't think I added it here, but we have a nest that they created in one of our boxes. And then we get some fun things like, here's a cow moose with her calf. They don't care about the box, although I like to think that this calf is admiring our handiwork here. And it's always fun to see a moose on a picture. We also see bears. I used to love seeing bears, but this summer they grounded about 8 of our boxes just by sitting on them and pulling them down. And so they're kind of on my shit list now, but it's cool to see other wildlife too. And so this is slightly out of date, although the fisher data is up to date. We see a lot of different species at our boxes. Some of them are incidental. Peromyscus like to climb trees. They're not using the boxes. Raccoons, bears, deer, moose, they can't get into the boxes. But we see a lot of these other species actually using the box. Porcupines like to chew on them. We're not very fond of that. And so, just to reiterate the point, we're focusing on fishers, but we will actually be analyzing data from all of the species that use our boxes to help us learn more about cavity needs for other species as well. Certainly, you wouldn't expect flying squirrels to spend a lot of time in there. They're a little big for flying squirrels, but we do see a lot of activity there. And just to kind of drive this home, this is a reproductive den that a female fisher used back in March 2014. And a couple winters ago, we went out to put a temperature logger in. If you look really close, you can see this string. That's from our temperature logger. When we went to put it in the box, a couple of flying squirrels popped out. These are northern flying squirrels. We dropped our temp logger in, they went back in, but really cool picture. So 2 species using this cavity over a 4-year period, 5-year period. Well, we went back in June to pick up our temperature logger, and we had a saw-whet owl actually nesting in our cavity. And so I don't know what's so special about this cavity. In fact, I think that maybe some of the other cavities get used by multiple species and we just haven't documented it. But certainly just some nice anecdotes and pictures. Ryan Panacea is actually a phenomenal wildlife photographer, so really happy to have him along these days. But cavities are important for fishers, but other things as well. And so I'm just gonna kind of, as I close here, I just wanna really quickly touch on fisher range expansion. I mentioned earlier that we're seeing fishers, while the core population has declined over the last 20 years, we also are seeing movement towards the periphery of where their range is in Minnesota. And so this map shows southern Minnesota. The pink dots are sightings that we've recorded over the last 15 years. And then the green background is forest color. And so one of the cool things that we see is a lot of consistent locations, especially in these areas that have large amounts of forest. But we also see a lot of fishers showing up in places where there's not a lot of forest, especially this is the Minnesota River Valley. And we think that part of the reason we're getting sightings here is that it's a forested movement corridor. But through these sightings, we've now confirmed that fishers are reproducing in the Twin Cities metro area. This is a picture from a park this past summer, female with a kit kind of playing on her back there. And so we know that this is a reproducing population, but we also know that it's not operating the same way as our fishers in the north. There seem to be some signs of movement and dispersal in areas that we would not expect fishers. You can see the shadow here. This is next to a forest, but this is an open ag field. This is not what we expect fishers to need or to spend their time in. And so there's really a lot of cool opportunities here, I think, for us to kind of expand what we know about the limits of where fishers will move and where they can live. And so that's, again, something that we're really looking forward to in the future, hopefully getting some funding and doing some more in-depth research here. So I hoped to be a little quicker than that, but I'm not going to read names, but I don't work by myself. There's a lot of great people working with me, some funding sources on the bottom. And I just like to say thank you. And I think there's some time. I'm happy to stay more or less as long as people want to ask questions or chat. So thanks again for the opportunity to talk with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. That was awesome. So yeah, guys, if you want to type questions or unmute yourself and ask, I'll be sticking around and Micah will as well. So thank you so much.
Yep. And I can, well, maybe I'll leave my screen up, but I'll put it to a better picture.
Sweet. I got a question for you.
Yeah, what's up, Nate?
While I'm thinking about it. So did the size of the trees that you put the boxes in affect fisher use at all? Did you see anything like if you put it in a smaller tree that they wouldn't think it was natural or something like that?
It's an open question. We need to get through more of our trail camera pictures before we actually do some preliminary analysis. I personally don't think that the size of the tree matters as much. We have seen fishers visiting some pretty small, like 8 to 9 inch diameter boxes in 8 to 9 inch diameter black spruce, for example. What I would suspect is that the size of the actual tree, since we generally try to pick the largest tree because these boxes are about, depending on the design, they're anywhere between 55 and 75 to 80 pounds. And so the tree, I mean, a 5-inch tree can hold a lot, but it would sway a lot in the wind. So the tree size is probably most likely to influence fisher use as an indicator for stand age or tree species. And so we're really interested. About half our boxes are in what we consider really high quality fisher habitat. And the other half are in some areas that they have a forest canopy cover, they have prey, but either because of the tree species or the age, they don't have a lot of natural cavities. So that's how we're trying to get at that, where will they use them? So I can't answer your question. We have seen them use stands at boxes and trees that are fairly small, but pending analysis.
Looks like you got some questions in the chat if you wanted to go check
let
those out.
me figure out how I do that. That would be more. Okay. So Shayla used to live near Hastings. It's a nice part of the state, really. A few too many people for me, but I agree that martins and fishers are cool animals, the coolest. And I may be biased, but I think that biologists that study them are the coolest biologists as well. How do you build the boxes? It's actually a bit more complicated than your traditional wood duck box. Because they need them in a pretty cold time of year, we have 2 layers of plywood with foam insulation in between them. If anyone, I had my email on the last one, otherwise Nate has my email. If anyone wants the plans to build boxes, just send me an email. I'm doing a lot of field work this week, so I'll be slow to follow up, but I'm more than happy to send those. And Everly, same thing. If you would really like to analyze photos and help with that, just send me an email and I can get you set up. So I don't know of any similar fisher studies in Wisconsin. A lot of, on the weasel side, a lot of the work on the forest weasels is on martens because they're a state endangered species. I know John Pauly at UW-Madison has done some fisher work, especially looking at diet in relation to porcupines and other things. But I'm not aware of anything similar right now in terms of den box or even carnivore interaction stuff. How high are the cavities? That's a really good question. So fishers don't make their own cavities. They use those formed by either other species like pileated woodpecker or by other natural processes such as mechanical damage, frost cracks, lightning strikes can leave scars that then woodpeckers exploit. And so it's really, I suspect that fishers like to be up high so they have a good vantage for predators before they leave. We've seen a lot of bobcats visiting reproductive dens, but they're kind of at the mercy of what's available. So we see them use some cavities where the opening might be a foot off the ground, and we see some that are 35 to 40 feet off the ground. Our boxes, because of logistical constraints, are going about 10 feet up to the opening. If we could get them 20, I think they'd probably like that, but it makes it really hard to monitor them.